The women's 3,000 meters at the AIT Grand Prix 2020 was far more than just another indoor race. It was a perfectly crafted battle of tactics, patience, and raw competitive instinct that unfolded lap by lap into one of the most compelling middle distance contests of the meet. From the very beginning, the atmosphere inside the arena hinted that something special was about to happen. The field combined experienced athletes with emerging young talents, creating a dynamic that almost guaranteed both strategic depth and emotional intensity. Among the most notable names on the start list were Great Britain's Rosie Clark and Ireland's Keely McGeehan, two runners with proven ability on the indoor circuit and the kind of racing intelligence that often defines championship-style events. Alongside them stood one of the most exciting young prospects in European athletics, Sarah Healy. Still a teenager at the time, Healy had already begun to attract serious attention following her remarkable double gold performance at the European Under-18 Championships. While she entered this race as an outsider compared to the more seasoned competitors, her presence added an intriguing layer of unpredictability. As the athletes took their positions on the start line, there was a noticeable sense of focus and quiet tension. Unlike sprint events, where everything is decided in seconds, the 3,000 meters demands discipline, awareness, and the ability to read both the race and the opponents. When the gun fired, the field surged forward in a controlled but purposeful manner. There was no frantic scrambling for position. Instead, the athletes quickly settled into a rhythm that reflected both respect for the distance and awareness of the tactical battle ahead. Early pacing duties were established almost immediately, ensuring that the race would not drift into a slow, purely tactical affair. The tempo was honest without being reckless, setting the foundation for a race that would reward both endurance and finishing speed. McGeehan and Clark wasted no time moving toward the front, positioning themselves exactly where experienced runners prefer to be, close enough to control the race, yet relaxed enough to conserve energy. The opening laps unfolded with remarkable composure. Every stride seemed calculated, every movement deliberate. The pack remained relatively compact, with no athlete willing to commit too early or risk burning energy unnecessarily. Behind the leading duo, Sarah Healy and the rest of the field maintained contact, carefully monitoring the pace while preparing for the inevitable increase in intensity later in the race. As the race progressed into its middle phase, the first signs of separation began to appear. What had started as a unified group gradually stretched into a more defined structure. McGeehan and Clark began to assert themselves, their smooth and efficient running allowing them to create a subtle but growing gap. It wasn't an explosive break. Rather, it was the result of sustained pressure, the kind that slowly wears down competitors who are unable to match the consistency of the leaders. Their stride patterns told a story of control and confidence. McGeehan, in particular, appeared determined to dictate the terms of the race. She maintained a steady tempo, ensuring that no one could comfortably sit in and wait for a late sprint without paying a price. Clark, meanwhile, demonstrated patience and tactical awareness, staying close enough to respond while avoiding unnecessary effort. It was a classic duel in the making, one athlete setting the pace, the other studying, waiting, and preparing. Behind them, the chase group began to fragment. The early unity gave way to individual battles, as each runner had to decide whether to attempt bridging the gap or focus on securing the best possible finish. Sarah Healy remained among those trying to stay connected, gaining invaluable experience by competing in such a high-quality field. For a young athlete, these moments are crucial, not just physically, but mentally, as they reveal the true demands of elite competition. Approaching the final kilometer, the race reached a turning point. The gap between the leading pair and the rest of the field had become undeniable. What had once been a multi-athlete contest was now clearly a head-to-head confrontation. The energy inside the arena shifted as spectators sensed the impending climax. Every lap felt more significant, every stride more intense. Clark began to edge closer to McGeehan, subtly reducing the distance between them. It was a calculated move, a signal that she was ready to challenge. McGeehan responded by maintaining her pace, refusing to relinquish control. The psychological battle was now fully underway, a test not only of physical ability but of nerve, timing, and belief. With just a few laps remaining, the tempo increased noticeably. McGeehan initiated a gradual acceleration, a strategic move designed to test Clark's limits before the final lap. It wasn't an all-out sprint, but it was enough to raise the stakes. Clark responded immediately, matching the surge and staying firmly within striking distance. The two athletes were now locked together, their duel becoming the defining narrative of the race. The bell lap arrived, and with it came a surge of energy from both the athletes and the crowd. This was the moment everything had been building toward. McGeehan made her decisive move down the back straight, unleashing a powerful kick that immediately created separation. It was a bold and confident attack, executed with precision and perfect timing. Clark fought to respond, digging deep and trying to match the acceleration. For a brief moment, it seemed possible that she might close the gap, but McGeehan's surge was relentless. Her form remained strong, her stride powerful, and her determination unmistakable. She was no longer just racing, she was claiming victory. In the final meters, the outcome became clear. McGeehan crossed the finish line in 8:48.28, a time that represented not only a win, but a significant personal breakthrough. Improving her lifetime best by nearly 7 seconds, she delivered a performance that marked a new level in her career. It was the kind of result that signals progression, a moment where potential transforms into tangible achievement. Clark followed shortly after, her performance equally commendable. She had executed a strong and intelligent race, pushing the eventual winner to her limits and demonstrating the consistency that defines elite competitors. Behind them, the rest of the field completed the race, each athlete carrying their own story of effort, strategy, and resilience. For Sarah Healy, the race served as another important step in her development. Competing against experienced athletes in such a high-pressure environment provided lessons that cannot be replicated in training. It was a glimpse into the level required to succeed, and a reminder of the journey still ahead. Ultimately, the women's 3,000 meters at the AIT Grand Prix 2020 stood out as a perfect example of what makes middle distance running so compelling. It wasn't just about speed, it was about timing, positioning, and the ability to make the right move at the right moment. McGeehan's victory was built not only on physical strength, but on tactical execution, patience, and the confidence to seize the decisive moment. Races like this remind us that athletics is as much a mental contest as it is a physical one. Every lap carries decisions, every move carries risk, and every finish tells a story. On this occasion, it was Keely McGeehan who wrote the final chapter, and did so in a way that ensured the race would be remembered long after the finish line was crossed. What made this race particularly fascinating was not just the final result, but the way it revealed the subtle layers of middle-distance racing that are often invisible to casual viewers. At first glance, it might seem like a straightforward contest of endurance and speed, but in reality, every phase of the race carried its own tactical significance. The positioning in the early laps, the controlled breathing, the ability to remain relaxed under pressure, all of these elements played a decisive role in shaping the outcome. Keely McGeehan's performance in particular stood out as a masterclass in controlled aggression. She did not rely on a single explosive moment alone. Instead, she built her victory progressively. By maintaining a steady but demanding pace from the front, she effectively reduced the number of athletes capable of staying in contention. This approach forced her competitors into a difficult position: either match the tempo and risk early fatigue, or fall behind and lose any chance of competing for the win. Rosie Clark's approach offered a fascinating contrast. Rather than taking control of the race, she chose to operate just behind the leader, conserving energy while keeping herself in an ideal position to respond. This kind of strategy requires immense discipline. It demands trust in one's finishing ability and the patience to wait for the right moment. For much of the race, it appeared that Clark had executed this plan perfectly. She remained composed, efficient, and ready to strike. However, the decisive factor came down to timing. In middle-distance races, especially over 3,000 meters indoors, the moment you choose to accelerate can define everything. Go too early, and you risk fading in the final stretch. Wait too long, and the opportunity disappears. McGeehan's surge was perfectly judged, not just physically, but tactically. She recognized the exact point at which Clark was most vulnerable and committed fully to her move. Another key element of this race was rhythm. Indoor tracks, with their tighter bends and shorter straights, demand a different kind of efficiency compared to outdoor racing. Maintaining momentum through the turns, minimizing unnecessary movement, and keeping a consistent cadence are all critical. McGeehan's ability to maintain that rhythm, even as the pace increased, gave her a significant advantage in the closing stages. The psychological dimension cannot be overlooked either. When two athletes separate themselves from the field and enter a direct duel, the race becomes as much about mental strength as physical capacity. Every move is observed, every hesitation noticed. McGeehan's willingness to lead for much of the race sent a clear message. She was confident, prepared, and ready to take responsibility for the outcome. That kind of mindset can place additional pressure on competitors, forcing them to react rather than dictate. For the chasing pack, the race presented a completely different set of challenges. Once the leaders established their gap, the focus shifted from winning to managing personal performance. Athletes had to balance the desire to chase with the reality of their own limits. In these situations, experience becomes crucial. Knowing when to push and when to hold back can make the difference between a strong finish and complete exhaustion. Sarah Healy's presence in this group added another layer of intrigue. As a young athlete, she was not expected to control the race or challenge for victory, but her ability to remain competitive within such a field spoke volumes about her potential. Races like this serve as a foundation for future success. They expose young runners to the intensity, speed, and tactical complexity of elite competition, accelerating their development in ways that training alone cannot achieve. Looking beyond the individual performances, this race also highlighted the depth of talent within European middle-distance running. The combination of established athletes and emerging stars created a competitive environment that pushes everyone forward. Each race becomes not just a contest, but a stepping stone toward higher standards and greater achievements. In many ways, the women's 3,000 meters at the AIT Grand Prix reflected the evolving nature of the sport. It showcased a blend of traditional racing intelligence, patience, positioning, tactical awareness, alongside modern expectations of speed and performance. Athletes are no longer relying solely on a final sprint. They are required to sustain high intensity throughout the race while still having the capacity to accelerate when it matters most. As the athletes left the track, the significance of the race extended beyond the times recorded on the scoreboard. For McGeehan, it marked a breakthrough that would undoubtedly influence her confidence and future ambitions. For Clark, it reinforced her status as a consistent and competitive presence at the elite level. And for the rest of the field, it provided lessons, motivation, and a clear benchmark of what it takes to succeed. Ultimately, races like this are what define middle-distance running. They remind us that victory is rarely the result of a single moment. Instead, it is built through a series of decisions, each one carrying weight and consequence. From the first step to the final sprint, every action contributes to the story. And in this case, it was a story of precision, resilience, and perfectly executed strategy.